Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, the luxury of friends in high places.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On at Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. And thanks as always to those making us their first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use our code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100 at prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Daily fantasy sports made easy with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. We're going to get back into a football frame of mind coming up in just a bit as we have got, time to stew on the result that was an extra time as the open week is now upon the Red Raiders. Also, we'll get to some thoughts on what could be next for the quarterback position when we next see them in action a little over a week and a half away. So we'll get to Texas Tech football coming up in just a moment. But Chris, it sounds like not only for Texas Tech football, but something large afoot, and do not pardon that pun, for Texas Tech athletics in a big picture kind of way. So how are we kicking off this week's conversation?
Deposit the Under Armour gear you've got in your closet into file 13, man. Trash it. Just kidding. Do what you want. But you are. So let me just kind of lay this out for you real quick. Yesterday there was some Twitter activity on purpose from the official Adidas folks and from Patrick Mahomes. There were some pictures shown of him walking into the stadium, as they played their afternoon game. And, he's pictured with the Texas Tech logo and then an Adidas and all these things. These are all strategic and all these things. This is them just kind of like winking at you a little bit. But I think later today, Cowan, I think you're going to get an official announcement with and I don't know how they'll do this, if this is a Mahomes announcement, if Adidas announces it, if Texas Tech announces it. But here's what I believe. I believe you have inked or however the timing goes on, whether this agreement has already been signed or intention to sign, whatever. I believe you're going to be under contract with Adidas for a decade. That's what I believe. That's the time frame. I can't say for 100% certainty, but I believe that is. I feel pretty strongly about that. I believe that there will be a component of the Mahomes brand in what you do. Because last week on Joey's coach's show, and it's funny because people I think felt like that he was, he randomly brought this up, but he was asked about this and just kind of said, "Yeah, we're tinkering around with the uniforms and building new uniforms and all that stuff." But again, he was asked about it. But I think you'll have all either Adidas or Adidas or Pat Mahomes branded Adidas gear going forward. Yeah, Under Armour's out. Sorry, Freudian slip there. But this is going to be a department-wide deal, and I think that you'll see a lot of signage and everything like that around your campus change in every venue. There's a lot more Under Armour signs up or branding than you would realize.
Right.
Protect this house. I mean, all those kinds of things in a lot of places, and those will all go away. And you're now about to become part of the three-stripe army. And, and so you'll finish up the academic year, Cowan, which is, I don't know, May 31st, June 31st, at one of those points in the summertime. That's when it officially switches. But you will be wearing Adidas gear from head to toe going forward. Again, 10-year agreement. I also will tell you there's some NIL components involved in this as well. I don't know whether this is Pat. This was all a very big deal to Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes, I think, was directly involved. This was very important to him, and he's the face of the NFL in many ways. And I think with that, I think it becomes very important to Texas Tech as well. And so while we always knew Under Armour had the right to match it, I think you feel like you now are aligned and have given kind of Pat. This is, I think, in some ways, Pat's way of giving back to the school, because I think you've gotten a much better contract with product and with money. And some people don't care about this. I get it, but a lot of people do. So hence the reason we're talking about it. But I think there's some NIL components in this, whether that is Mahomes giving to the Matador Club or Adidas giving to the Matador Club, potential players at the next level being brought under the Adidas umbrella. Like, I mean, for example, I wouldn't rule out like the Tyree Wilsons or the Jordan Brooks or the next NFL individuals that played at Texas Tech being given like specific Adidas Pat Mahomes brand treatment. You follow me? So this is far reaching. There's a lot of components here, but I think that it's really good news for Texas Tech. They feel like it is. Pat Mahomes, I think, is ecstatic about it. And so here you are. But yeah, you'll get something, I think, official, if not today, extremely soon, but I believe a decade long. And I think you are in much better shape, product and branding wise, than you were. So
really amazing, and really amazing to see the impact that the world's best football player can have on an apparel negotiation. But I wanted to turn for a minute, Chris, to some insight into maybe that negotiation or the back and forth, whether it was with Under Armour or Adidas. How close was it at the end of it? Was it always going to be Adidas in your mind? What part did Under Armour actually play at the end?
They had a period of time, which we have just finished up, I think recently. Like, I don't know if it was middle of last week, end of last week, or we're not too far removed from when their period of time to match this deal came to an end, because I think it was 20 business days maybe from the time that I think Adidas offered a contract to Texas Tech. At that point, Texas Tech must say, hey, we've been offered this. You've negotiated the right to where you get to match it, but here it is. And so I think that they clearly ran out the ground ball. And I think that, you probably, Kevin Plank and the Under Armour folks probably just look at it. I think too, I wonder this. I'll never know. We'll never know. I do wonder this. It's like, man, what does Texas Tech really want? Do they want to stay with us, or would they prefer to go with their guy here who's directly involved, who just signed a $500 million contract, who's a Super Bowl champion, an MVP, and he's pushing for this? Geez, I wonder what Texas Tech would really prefer. You know what I mean? And so I just wonder if Under Armour felt like, man, I don't know if this makes sense for us. I don't know. They could have done it. They just re-upped a big deal with Notre Dame, did Under Armour, that I think was a pretty hefty contract. And Notre Dame's one of the premier brands in the sport. But I think this was very important to Adidas, because it was very important to Pat Mahomes. Because, Lionel Messi is probably the top Adidas guy, okay, or whoever wears their stuff. But Patrick Mahomes is probably easily a number 2. I'm talking Q rating or worldwide or move the needle type person, right? And so that would be my suspicion, that Under Armour just was like, man, I just don't know if this makes sense for us. And I think too that Adidas put it way out there on product and money and time of contract and some of the other things that they built into this, like maybe an NIL component where they would give some funds to, as part of their deal, to the Matador Club. So anyway, I think all those things factor in here.
Wow, really interesting to process, and maybe anticipated as far as all the natural alignments of that relationship you're describing between Texas Tech and Patrick Mahomes and Adidas, obviously, but not sure what I actually expected to see come to pass. But here we are, apparently anticipating formal announcement of this impending relationship. Certainly curious to hear, if you're one of those interested in such things, your thoughts in the YouTube comments on this result.
And real quick, Calvin, I'll say this: like, I think in some ways it's huge for football. I think some will go, it's not that big a deal, but I think for like a sport like basketball, this is a big deal. I think that there's other sports that I think for track it's a big deal. I don't. I'm just kind of looking at it sport by sport.
Yeah.
But I just know that the way the basketball recruiting game is played, because it's been widely known that wearing Under Armour isn't exactly the best thing for men's basketball, for that product, for that, sport, based on how recruiting works and all that stuff. So I think that basketball definitely benefits here, but I think football obviously benefits too. And that's why Pat was so on board with wanting to make this happen. Texas, I'm trying to think of the Adidas schools. A&M wears it. And I'm trying to, there's a handful of them that wear Adidas, but it's not that many, and they're very selective with what they get involved with. And you don't forget, remember we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, also a component of this is going to be Lululemon.
That's right. Yep. I have not forgotten that. I am keeping my eyes peeled every time I'm at G-Bo's to see if any Lululemon is on the shelves yet.
There you
go.
Yes.
Yeah, there'll be a whole lot of things to process about how all these pieces come together, but will be the end of an era as far as that relationship is concerned, one that's been in place for a long, long time between Texas Tech and Under Armour. So let us know what you think about that. Again, in the YouTube comments, would love to hear from you. We're back to Red Raider football coming up dead ahead. An open week is upon us. So what does that actually mean for the way that Texas Tech will utilize their time? And we'll get to some thoughts on the QB position when we do gather again for a football game in about a week and a half. Coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. First, today's episode brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company, changing the non-alcoholic beer game one can at a time, and it's time for your game-changing moment of the week. This week, there was 15 minutes on the clock in the first quarter when the ball was kicked off, beginning the long slide toward a loss. Yada, yada, yada. 5 turnovers later, Tech has fallen to BYU 27-14. Just like that game-changing moment, Athletic Brewing Company is changing the game with non-alcoholic beer that tastes good. Great tasting, award-winning, and you're going to find more than 50 styles at athleticbrewing.com. But what you'll never find with Athletic Brewing is a hangover. Change the game by finding Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic beer at a store near you or online at athleticbrewing.com. And right now, first-time customers can get 15% off your first online order by using the code Locked On. That's Locked On for 15% off your first online order. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Find Athletic Brewing Company at athleticbrewing.com. Fit for all times. Glad to have you along for the ride on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day with Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Going the wrong way once again for the Red Raiders on the road, unfortunately, from Provo, Utah. Hopefully you caught our reaction show. It is yours as well. This Locked On Texas Tech fam family. Our reaction episode yesterday, if you didn't take it in on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. But one of the unfortunate parts of this result, Chris, and I know it had to be on a lot of fans' minds and coaches and players probably too as well, but the extra time that you got on the other side of this one to sit on it. Whatever the result was going to be, you're going to have more time to utilize it one way or another, as the open week is now upon you before you're back in action on a Thursday night against Texas Christian. But I don't think this is obviously the one you wanted to sit on. So I was curious, what does change, if anything, as far as some routine here during this week, or does it remain mostly in place?
Yeah, it's weird because this is not a traditional bye week in the sense that, you don't play this Saturday, but you play the following Saturday, because their game week will actually spill into next weekend because you play on a Thursday. So I think, the following week will all be adjusted and backed up to where, Thursday is treated like Saturday, and then everything just kind of moves back. And so I think I think they'll be given Friday and Saturday off. I think they'll have lighter practices on Tuesday and Wednesday. I don't think they'll have to do anything, or they had to do anything last night on a Sunday, which they would typically get back up there and kind of do a heavier walkthrough type of practice just to get the soreness out and kind of start to get going and get ready for the following week. And they would typically have a Monday off. So this is a week where I think, honestly, and I think these are some things that we'll talk about this week, but I think you really have a lot of conversations about your roster. I think you do a lot of recruiting, including visits, and go out and see and attend some games. this coming weekend. I think that you get away from it for a few days. It's been a grind. You haven't had a lot of luck. You've been average. You've been making some mistakes, just all the above. But it'll allow some guys to heal up and all those things. Because, Joey said it to me after the game on Saturday night, man, I wish we could play tomorrow. But I do think that we would want to play with our guys being healthy. And he's talking about specific guys, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I do think that it's not going to hurt us to get away from this for a few days. But that's how you use, bye week it's about kind of doing some of the things that you just don't have time to do in the middle of the weekly routine and game planning. And so there's some foresight. Okay, let's you're always recruiting, but this allows you to get on the road and leave town and go see, Micah Hudson, Will Hammond, whoever it may be. And I do think that with the portal window like looming, I think you really have some conversations about kind of where you're at. Whether those are, just internally, just to kind of figure out, because you've got to be ready for some certain scenarios that'll crop up here in about, 4 to 5 weeks, because I think the portal window opens up on December the 1st, and you're going to lose some folks, and you're going to add some folks. That's just the way this thing goes. And so I think you need to be prepared for a lot of different options there.
I did wonder if there was going to be a little getaway time and not like, hey, let's take a mini vacation or anything, but did anything change because of the result Saturday? Is this still the way they were going to kind of go about?
Oh yeah,
this. Okay. I don't know, man. I get the thought. Everybody can feel differently about it. I get the thought of, damn, I wish we were playing a game tomorrow. We want to get back out and erase this result. But I also wonder, Chris, from, an injury or health and wellness standpoint, if this isn't something you could really utilize to your benefit, because there's no other way to describe it than you coming into this banged up at this point in the season.
And they so, I like, for example, this particular week, again, I don't think they had to do anything, last night, which normally they would have. Monday is always an off day. And then Tuesday and Wednesday practices this week. So tomorrow and Wednesday, I think what you'll have like the younger guys really have more of the practice. Whereas like,
gotcha,
your veterans and your guys that need to heal up or that have been playing a ton, they'll go in the weight room and do some of those things and not go through extra reps and all that. This will be more of a developmental week, which is fairly typical, almost kind of how most schools operate during bowl prep. There's a point where the veterans really get heavily involved, but a lot of it is about your younger players and development and all that, because they, the thing about it is, like, now that you have 4 games left, like anybody that hadn't broken the seal on it, like a lot of young receivers, a lot of, and I'll tell you, I hope they break the seal on some of these young receivers because I think that there's a lot of average at your receiver position right now, and it's frustrating to watch with some older guy. Like, and I'm not talking about Miles Price or, I think he's produced and all that, but I think it's kind of like time to kind of look ahead a little bit. But, Justin Horn, a linebacker, he was on the trip to Provo. I think John Curry, another freshman, has got some more time. Amir Washington, a defensive tackle. Like, that's what really the rest of this season is going to start to be about. And if you can get to a bowl game, I will throw this out at you too. They've changed the rule. If you can get to a bowl game, your early enrollees can participate in those practices. Like your Will Hammonds and your Micah Hudsons and, these early enrollees that are going to show up at semester, they can actually participate in practice, which just jumpstarts their development and all those things. And I'm here for it if you can get that far, but that's what this week. So you're going to get, I think, what you think is best. There's nobody. I mean, they definitely need to. They are beaten up because, like, last night, or not. My days are all mixed up. Saturday night, you didn't finish the game with. Let's see, you had no Tharp, no Cole Spencer, no Mike Dingle, and no Baron Morton. And I may have forgotten others. And there's other guys that have been out for a while that we're not even going to mention their name. But then you finished up the game. No Cameron Valdez, no Brendan Jordan, one of your freshmen. You were missing CJ Baskerville didn't finish the game. I think Monroe Mills and Rusty Stats also almost came out of the game. and we're kind of playing through some things, and we're over there on the sideline trying to work through things while the offense wasn't on the field. So yes, these guys desperately need some just time to heal up mentally as much as anything too.
Yeah, I mean the thought of time to stew is kind of a dangerous thought, because you certainly don't want to dwell on the disappointment that has been part of your most recent result and some other results to this point in the season. And Chris, I guess as we wrap up the conversation here today, specifically with the quarterback position, this is obviously a big question as to whether or not you can breathe some air back into your season before it's all said and done. Can you pursue a 6th win and try to get back to a bowl game? I think that answer probably for fans is going to feel a lot differently depending upon whether or not we're talking about a 3rd-string freshman quarterback or we're talking about, the luxurious 2nd-string quarterback. If we were so lucky to have your 2nd-stringer back in Behren Morton. And some might just flat out disagree and say you're loony to even think about it with either quarterback. But I'm still somewhat there. If number 2 was back and feeling better, could I talk myself into, can they get to a 6th win? I may want to still play that game. And I know we're a week and a half away from the next snap being taken, but was there some optimism about the chances of Morton being back on the field next time we're playing a game, or how are you seeing that a week and a half away? First, today's episode brought to you by PrizePicks, the most exciting way to test your skills and play daily fantasy sports, and a great way to add juice to any game, anytime. And if you've got the game, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and a giant selection of players, projections, and stat categories are just part of what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, right now, PrizePicks is going to match your first deposit up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDONCollege at prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Daily fantasy sports made easy. Was there some optimism about the chances of Morton being back on the field next time we're playing a game, or how are you seeing that a week and a half away?
Oh, 1,000% he will be back. Yeah. I mean, I think he was trying to talk his way into the game, or being ready to play and all that against BYU. Just hadn't quite been cleared medically and all these things, and they just. And I think he feels some ownership there, and I feel like I've let this, and he shouldn't feel that way, but I think everybody. I just feel like if a healthy Behren would have played, or a healthy Tyler Shuck, it's funny how you've already a healthy Tyler Shuck, you beat BYU, a healthy Behren Morton, you beat BYU. We have not seen really much of a healthy Behren Morton though yet this season, truly healthy. I think the bye week will be good for him for that shoulder. I think he gets some of that arm strength back. I think all these things, because BYU was just ready to be beaten, but you just didn't quite have enough, because, we could talk about all we want to, man, about rushing defense or a play call or turnovers or penalties or whatever we want. Until you have a quarterback that can sustain some level of play, you're going to continue to be very average. You just are. And you may win some and lose some and all that. You can put a season together like you did last year and kind of piece it together. But you want to take a next step, and this is what it's going to require. You just got to – and everybody, as we've seen, man, the UCF kids missed some time. The Kansas kids missed some time. Oklahoma State didn't really figure out about Bowman for 3 weeks or so into the season, and they kind of settled on him, and then their running game has exploded. Now there's questions about Texas because Ewers' injury is there. How serious is it? OU hadn't lost a game yet because guess what? Their quarterback is really good, and he hadn't missed a game. I think there's just some direct correlations in this deal. But I'm ready to see, Behren healthy and then let him lead this team, because now it is his team. It's his program for the next 2.5 years. But as we talked about on the reaction show, 3 years in a row with 3 different starters, 4 out of 5 with 3 different starters in games. Hard to win that way, man. But yes, you will see Barron against TCU. Joey McGuire talked about that after the game with me. He also indicated Mason Tharp and Jacob Rodriguez would be back as well. So those are huge additions. And so what? I don't know what happens to the other list of guys that didn't finish the game. Good question. I can just tell you what he told me after the game about who would return.
We're going to hear from head coach Joey McGuire in a media press conference setting coming up on Tuesday of this week. So tomorrow, instead of the traditional Monday meeting. So we'll see what further light maybe he can shed on some of those situations. And man, you never want to waste a failure, whether in life or in sports. There's something to learn from all of those.
Nick Saban. I heard him say that the other day. I love you channeling your inner Nick Saban. We need more of that. Never waste a failure.
I mean, you got 2 stacked up, right? And if you're not learning something from them, then you're not really doing anything. So it's going to be a tough week and a half. I have no doubt. It's going to be a fine line to walk, trying to motivate and encourage all at the same time with these disappointing results. So we'll leave it to those guys that are paid handsomely to do that. But it's going to be a tough week because you're sitting on a couple of results that really, really went down with a bad taste, right? Not just some losses, but some things that, God, just had you pulling your hair out walking away from both of these. And now you got some extra time to hopefully utilize it for the best.
Yeah, and TCU just got throttled by Kansas State. I mean, gave up 400 yards of offense in the first half.
Amazing.
And guess what? Will Howard was back playing some quarterback, as was Avery Johnson. But that'll be an interesting game between Texas Tech and TCU coming up. We've got plenty of time to get into it, and anyway, I will continue to remain engaged here. I know other people are kind of like trying to figure out, basketball is on the horizon, but you've got portal, you've got recruiting, you've got a lot coming up with your football program. We've mentioned the Adidas thing. The Cranes are still very active, but nobody's trying to take a step backwards here with your football program. You must continue to push and grind and aim high. And that's why everybody's so frustrated. But I've exhausted my knowledge on these subjects for this day.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Just for this day, though. You're back tomorrow
That's right.
With more knowledge. Yeah, Cranes are active. Sandhill Crane season just around the corner, boys. I think that's what Chris was alluding to. I'll just still sit here and say, as long as there is going to be some great effort given, you can keep me engaged as a fan. I don't feel like I've seen an empty box there. It hasn't been what it was a season ago. I don't feel the same way. There's no way to get around that to me. But as you get back to it for a Thursday night fight against an in-state rival with leather on the line, we are battling for a saddle. I think you'll have a good opportunity to get up for that one. And we're going to utilize our time with you well here this week, so stick with us during the open week. We've got things to discuss well beyond football. We will have some basketball primers to get into here this week, and also want to continue, of course, to look ahead to what's happening with Grant McCaslin as he enters year number 1. And I think there's some Big 12 news out there to consider this week as well, as we've got some scheduling components and all kinds of things happening outside of the football realm. But of course, that's always on our minds and will continue to be during the open week. So I hope you'll join us here once again on Locked On Texas Tech tomorrow. Chris, appreciate the time as always, man. We'll see you on the other side.
Shout out to the Three Stripes. Shout out to the folks in Provo. You were nice until the game started. We will remember this when you make the return trip. I can assure you, be nice until the game starts. Appreciate you, Cowan. And we'll talk to you, tomorrow. But keep hope alive, everybody.
That's right. And subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. For Chris, I'm Casey, and we'll see you for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.